You have brought this question to the text. YHWH, give us the latest Bible prophecy on the Iran, Persia, and Elam war for this day today. The lead verse opens the gate. Exodus chapter 4, verse 5 declares, "This is so they may believe that YHWH Elohim of their forefathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob has appeared to you." Before any oracle of war sounds, the first word is recognition. The Elohim of the covenant has appeared. He has made himself visible, tangible, and present. Every subsequent word must be read through this lens. YHWH has appeared, and his appearing produces belief. The draw reveals a profound concentration. 10 verses from the book of Ezekiel stand within this single reading. Ezekiel is the prophet who speaks most directly to the end times war against Israel, and these verses cluster around oracles of judgment against the nations. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 15 describes the invasion, saying, "And you will come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land." Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 18 describes the aftermath, speaking of eating the flesh of the mighty and drinking the blood of the princes of the earth. Ezekiel chapter 38 specifically names Persia as part of this coalition. Furthermore, Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 5 adds a critical dimension regarding the prince whose heart is lifted up because of his riches and his traffic. This maps directly onto the pride of wealth and trade that becomes the occasion for judgment in the region today. The opening of the Elam oracle is also in view. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 1 asks, "Has he no heir? Why then does their king inherit by covenant Gad, and his people live in his cities?" Elam is the biblical name for southwestern Iran, and this verse signals that the prophecy concerning Elam is actively unfolding. The interpretive key lies in the Persian court itself. Esther chapter 3, verse 7 records, "In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar." The draw mechanism mirrors this very act. The inquiry asks for prophecy for this day today, and the verse describes a lot cast from day to day and from month to month. But the testimony of Esther is that YHWH turned the intended destruction into deliverance. This pattern is echoed directly in Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 2, which declares, "Our Elohim turned the curse into a sacred blessing." In the Persian context, lots are cast to determine timing, but YHWH determines the outcome. The Daniel connection reinforces this Persian court prophecy. Daniel chapter 9, verse 19 is an intercessory cry, "O Adonai, listen and do. Defer not, for your own sake, O my Elohim, because your city and your people are called by your name." Daniel chapter 2, verse 3 shows a Gentile king troubled by a dream, proving the nations outside the covenant are anxious, and YHWH alone gives the interpretation. A sustained thread of water imagery runs through this draw, answering the reality of the conflict over the waterways. Isaiah chapter 65, verse 13 draws the sharpest line, saying, "My slaves will drink, but you will be thirsty." The current war is fought over the water, the strait through which the wealth of the earth flows. Yet the draw testifies that the water belongs to YHWH. Psalms chapter 114, verses 7 and 8 declare that he turned the rock into a standing water, the flint into a fountain of waters. He does not need the strait to provide for his people. Ezekiel chapter 47, verse 4 speaks of waters that rise, and Joshua chapter 4, verse 18 remembers when the waters of Jordan return to their place. The adversary control of the water will not stand, for the fountain belongs to the Creator. There is also a cosmic and spiritual dimension to this earthly warfare. Job chapter 2, verse 1 establishes a heavenly court convening on a specific day, saying, "Again there was a day when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before YHWH, and Satan came also among them to present himself before YHWH." What happens on earth in those days has a corresponding convocation in the heavens. Enoch chapter 64, verse 1 speaks of angels who descended to the earth and revealed what was hidden, and Enoch chapter 69, verse 20 adds that through an oath the sun and moon complete their course, and deviate not from their ordinance from ages to ages. The appointed seasons will not be disrupted by human warfare. The cosmic order holds because YHWH has ordained it. Yet the devastation is real. Numbers chapter 1, verses 1 through 3 speaks of registering every male head from 20 years old and up from all that are able to go to war in Israel for an organized army. 1 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 4 recalls how David hamstrung all the chariot horses, reserving only 100 chariots. Judges chapter 20, verse 29 notes that Israel set the ambush. Jeremiah chapter 18, verse 21 describes the cost to deliver up their children to the famine and pour out their blood by the force of the sword, and let their women be bereaved of their children and become widows. The verse does not glorify war. It testifies to its heavy cost. The draw presents two kinds of rebuilding. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 9 and 10 warns of rebuilding from pride, saying, "The bricks are fallen down, but we will rebuild with cut stones." Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 18 offers the covenant alternative, saying, "Let us get up and rebuild," a response undertaken in humility. The mathematical verdict confirms the direction of this testimony. The probability of yes equals 99.0%. The probability of no equals 0.9%. The probability of unresolved equals 0.1%. This is a strong anomaly where all gates pass. The guided draw E-value and the triple convergence standard show an extreme departure from random chance. The discovery level signal reaches 6.23 sigma. The Father is speaking to the full architecture of covenantal standing. So what is the direct answer to the question brought to the text today? The war you see is real, and it stands within the pattern of prophetic word. Persia and Elam are named in the oracles. The lot is cast, but YHWH is the one who determines its outcome. The water is his. The vengeance is his, as Ezekiel chapter 25, verse 14 declares. The rebuilding must be from covenant faithfulness, not from pride. Do not be terrified. As Mark chapter 6, verse 50 says, "Be of good cheer, it is I, be not terrified." Call upon his name, for Psalms chapter 18, verse 3 promises, "I will call upon YHWH, who is worthy to be praised, so I will be delivered from my enemies." The fasts of judgment will become joy and gladness, as Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19 declares. Psalms chapter 85, verse 3 adds, "You have taken away all your fury. You have turned yourself from the fierceness of your anger. All things will be subdued, that Elohim may be all in all," as 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 28 affirms. You have an anointing from the Holy One, and you know all things, as 1 John chapter 2, verse 20 reminds us. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 9 affirms, "You have loved covenant faithfulness and hated covenant wickedness." The covenant faithful will be an age-lasting memory, as Psalms chapter 112, verse 6 states. He has appeared. Believe. The verse is drawn in this Shield 17.12 session where Exodus chapter 4, verse 5, Isaiah chapter 60, verse 10, 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 33, 1 Enoch chapter 48, verse 6, Enoch chapter 64, verse 1, Hosea chapter 14, verse 9. This concludes today's interpretation under the Shield Protocol.